He called her comfortably plain, a safe, boring, and ultimately disposable wife, when Julian Ashford, a man who measured life in stock tickers and brand labels, traded her for a newer model. He never looked back. He left her with nothing but a shattered life and a box of old baking recipes. He forgot her. But the world wouldn't. 10 years later, a custom Rolls Royce Phantom, black as polished obsidian, glides to a halt. The woman who steps out, flanked by private security, isn't just a success. She's a statement, and her ex-husband is about to learn the true cost of his mistake. The silence in their Park Avenue apartment was the loudest thing Amelia had ever heard. It was a sterile, expensive silence, broken only by the rhythmic drip of the Nespresso machine Julian insisted was the only civilized way to start a morning. Amelia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down on a New York that felt 1,000,000 miles away. She was wearing a simple cotton robe, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was, by all accounts, a simple woman. She found joy in the smell of rising bread, the perfect crackle of a crème brûlée, and the comfort of a worn-in novel. Julian found joy in none of those things. He walked into the kitchen, already in a flawlessly tailored Zegna suit. His shoes, polished to a mirror shine, clicked ominously on the Italian marble. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the espresso shot pouring into a tiny white cup. "You didn't lay out the navy blue tie," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of her failure. "I'm sorry, Julian. I was working on that new brioche recipe and He finally turned, his face a mask of bored impatience. Julian Ashford was a man who had inherited a partnership at his father's boutique investment firm, Ashford & Co. He was handsome in a cold, angular way, and he believed firmly that life was a transaction. You traded up, always. "Recipes," he scoffed, sipping the espresso in one quick, bitter motion. "Amelia, we've been married for 5 years. When I married you, I thought you'd evolve." "Evolve?" Her voice was small. "What does that mean?" "Look at you." He gestured, not unkindly, but with the detached air of a critic reviewing a bad play. "You're still you. You're talking about brioche, the wives of my partners. They're running charities. They're sitting on boards. They're visible. You always said you loved my baking," she whispered, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. "I loved the idea of it." "It was quaint," he said, "but it's not enough. You're not enough. You're adequate, Amelia. Just comfortably, boringly adequate, and I can't be adequate anymore." The words hung in the air, thick and toxic. He was leaving her. She knew it before he said the next words. "I've met someone." Of course he had. "Her name is Chloe Velez." Amelia's blood ran cold. Chloe Velez, the daughter of Ricardo Velez, a man whose portfolio was rumored to be worth 10 figures. A man Julian had been desperately trying to land as a client. "She's—" Amelia started but couldn't finish. "She's everything, Amelia," Julian said, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine passion lit his eyes. "She's vibrant. She's connected. She understands what I need. She's not covered in flour all the time." That was the line that broke her. Not the affair, not the betrayal, but the casual disdain for the one thing that brought her joy. "So that's it?" Amelia asked, wrapping her robe tighter around herself, as if it could shield her from the shrapnel. "That's it." He walked to the door, grabbing his briefcase. "The lawyers will be in touch. My attorney, Robert, will handle the specifics. He's very good. This will be clean. I'm taking the apartment, of course. It's premarital. The car, too. You can keep your baking things." He paused at the door, adjusting his Rolex. "I'll have my assistant send a box for my remaining cufflinks." Be out by the end of the week. It's better this way." The door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the sterile marble tomb. Amelia didn't cry. Not yet. She walked numbly into the kitchen. On the counter was her pride and joy, a spiral-bound notebook filled with her grandmother's recipes and her own experimental notes. Julian had always called it clutter. She picked it up. Her hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was rage. A cold, slow-burning rage that started in her toes and set her entire body alight. He had called her adequate. He had left her for a walking, talking bank account. He had taken her love, her support, and her loyalty and discarded it like a day-old croissant. She looked around the apartment that had never felt like a home. It was a showroom, a sterile, loveless box that reflected the man she had just lost, or rather, the man who had just lost her. Amelia Hayes Ashford walked into the bedroom, pulled out a dusty suitcase, and began to pack. She took her clothes, she took her grandmother's notebook, and she took a small silver picture frame from his desk. It was a photo of her, years ago, laughing as she was covered in flour. She left the frame face down on his perfectly made bed. By the end of the day, she was gone. Julian Ashford, when he returned that evening with Chloe on his arm, would find the apartment exactly as he left it, only quieter, and on the kitchen counter, a single, perfect lemon meringue tart. It was Amelia's specialty. Chloe wrinkled her nose. "Oh, calories. Throw it out." Julian, without a second thought, scraped the perfect tart into the trash. He never even tasted it. The first 6 months were a blur of beige walls and instant ramen. Amelia had moved into a tiny, third-floor walk-up in a less-than-glamorous part of Queens. The rent was high, the heating was unreliable, and the kitchen consisted of a 2-burner hot plate and a mini-fridge that hummed a constant, mournful tune. She was utterly, devastatingly broke. The divorce had been as clean as Julian promised. His attorney, Robert, had systematically dismantled her, leveraging a prenup she'd signed in a daze of pre-wedding love. She walked away with a one-time payout so small it was insulting. It evaporated after the deposit, first month's rent, and the cost of a used mattress. Amelia got a job. 2, in fact. By day, she was a barista at a generic coffee chain, the smell of burnt espresso clinging to her clothes. By night, she waitressed at a mediocre Italian restaurant, dodging advances from the kitchen staff and surviving on cold, leftover pasta. She was exhausted. She was lonely. And she was fading. The vibrant woman who loved the science of baking was replaced by a hollow-eyed shell, just trying to make it to the next paycheck. One rainy Tuesday night, she collapsed onto her lumpy mattress, a pathetic $23 in tips clutched in her hand. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. She was drowning in Julian's wake. She stared at the water-stained ceiling, and, for the first time since the day he left, she wept. She cried for the woman she had been, for the dreams she had put on hold, and for the sheer, grinding injustice of it all. The emotional storm raged for hours, and when it finally subsided, it left behind a strange, empty calm. She felt light. She had hit rock bottom. The only way to go was up. She got up and walked to the small box in the corner, the only one she hadn't unpacked. She opened it. Inside, nestled between her old stand mixer and a set of copper measuring cups, was her grandmother's leather-bound recipe book. She opened it. The smell of vanilla extract, cardamom, and old paper filled her tiny apartment. It smelled like home. It smelled like love. On the first page, in her grandmother's elegant script, was a simple inscription. "Amelia, never let anyone tell you your fire isn't bright enough. Just add more sugar. A small, watery laugh escaped her. She turned the pages, her fingers tracing over recipes for Alsatian apple tarts, for a lavender and honey madeleine, for a midnight chocolate torte, so dark it was almost black. These weren't just recipes. They were alchemy. They were memories. She looked at her pathetic kitchen. She looked at the $23 on her nightstand. It was an insane idea. The next day, she spent the $23, not on groceries for herself, but on the best ingredients she could afford: a small bag of Belgian chocolate, organic lavender, and fresh local butter. She stayed up all night, using her hot plate and a small, finicky toaster oven. The work was meticulous, frustrating, and utterly, transcendentally joyful. She hadn't felt this alive in years. By 5 a.m., her tiny apartment was filled with the most glorious aroma. She had 24 perfect lavender and honey madeleines and a 6-inch midnight torte. She had no plan. She just knew she had to make. She took a picture with her old smartphone and, on a whim, posted it to an Etsy shop she created on the spot. She named it Aura Patisserie, after the inscription in her grandmother's book: "The fire, the aura within." She priced the torte at $50, a number that seemed absurd. She went to her barista job, fell asleep on her feet, and forgot all about it. When she checked her email that night, her heart stopped. "You have a new order." Someone had bought the torte. Someone in Manhattan. She stared at the screen. $50. It was a lifeline. She baked the torte, packaged it in a simple white box with a handwritten thank you note, and spent half her earnings to subway it to the customer herself. The next week she got 2 orders. The week after, 5. Amelia quit her waitressing job. She kept the barista job for the health insurance and the early morning access to a real oven. She'd sneak in her own ingredients, baking her aura orders before the store opened, praying her manager wouldn't notice. It was a grueling, sleepless existence. She poured every cent back into the business. She lived on coffee and day-old pastries. But she was building something. The turning point came 3 months in. An order came through for a midnight torte from a D. Chen. Amelia baked it with her usual care and delivered it. 2 days later, her phone exploded. She had 50 new orders, then 100. Her Etsy shop crashed. Confused and terrified, she Googled her shop's name. She found it on the front page of NY Bites, one of the most influential food blogs in the city. The byline was David Chen. The review was short, but it was electric. "Forget your cronuts and your rainbow bagels. The single greatest dessert in New York is being made in a ghost kitchen in Queens by a baker named Amelia. I don't know who she is, but the midnight torte is not a dessert. It is a religious experience. It is the dark, rich, complex flavor of a dream you're not ready to wake up from. This is not baking. This is soul work." By the end of the day, she had an email. It wasn't an order. It was from a venture capital firm. "Dear Ms. Hayes," it began, "we've been following Mr. Chen's blog for years. He's never been wrong. We'd like to talk about scaling your soul work. We're Vantage Culinary Ventures. How do you feel about a brick and mortar?" Amelia stared at the email, the steam from her coffee pot fogging up the screen. She was still wearing her stained barista apron. She typed 2 words. "I'm interested." The address for Vantage Culinary Ventures wasn't on Wall Street. It was in a sleek, minimalist building in the meatpacking district, an area that smelled more like Le Labo perfume than the slaughterhouses of its past. Amelia walked in wearing her one good outfit, a pair of black slacks and a white blouse she'd bought at a thrift store and tailored herself. She clutched her handbag, which contained her laptop and a freshly baked box of lavender madeleines. She was terrified. The office was a hushed expanse of reclaimed wood and glass. She was led into a conference room overlooking the Hudson River. A man stood at the window, silhouetted against the morning light. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming. I'm Grayson Harrison." He turned. He was not what she expected. He was sharp, impeccably dressed in a casual but clearly expensive knit, and his eyes were analytical. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he was already halfway through solving. "Mr. Harrison?" "Thank you for seeing me," Amelia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please, sit." He gestured to the table. "I won't waste your time. I've read the blog. I've seen your Etsy numbers. Impressive growth, by the way. And I tasted this." He tapped a white box on the table. Her box. "My team ordered one last night. The Midnight Tort." Amelia sat on the edge of her seat. "And?" "And," Harrison said, leaning forward, "it is, without question, the best chocolate cake I have ever eaten. But I'm not in the business of cake, Miss Hayes. I'm in the business of brands." He pulled up a projection on the wall. It was her Etsy page. "This is fine, for a hobby, or a patisserie. It's a good name. Vague, but elevated. Your photos are terrible. Your packaging is non-existent. Your logistics are a nightmare. You're a brilliant artisan, but you are a terrible businesswoman." Amelia's face flushed. I'm learning. I'm sure. But you're at a crossroads," Harrison continued, his tone softening slightly. "Right now, you're a trend. David Chen made you famous. In 6 months, he'll find a new soul work taco, and you'll be back to your 2-burner hot plate, or you partner with me. What does that mean? It means we build an empire. I don't want to open a bakery. I want to create a global luxury brand. I want aura to be synonymous with indulgence. I want your Midnight Tort to be the new little blue box from Tiffany's. I want people to crave this." He painted a picture that stole her breath away. He wasn't talking about a shop in Queens. He was talking about flagship stores in New York, London, Paris, and Tokyo. He was talking about a centralized commissary, e-commerce, and corporate gifting. "And what? What do I have to do?" Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything," Harrison said. "But you'll do it my way. You are the product. Your story, your craft. That's the aura. We'll refine it. We'll package it. And we'll sell it to the world. We will give you a salary, a world-class team, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and an education in business you can't buy. In exchange, Vantage gets 51% of the company." Amelia's heart sank. "You get control." "Yes, for now. We take the risk, we get the control. But you, Ms. Hayes, you get the platform. You get to stop being a barista and start being a CEO. You get to bake in a kitchen with more than a toaster oven. And you'll own 49% of a multi-million-dollar company instead of 100% of a tiny Etsy shop." It was a brutal, beautiful, terrifying offer. Give up control to gain her dream. She looked at Grayson Harrison, a man who saw her, not as a woman, but as a brand. In a way, it was cleaner than her relationship with Julian. This was a transaction, an honest one. "I have one more thing for you to try," Amelia said. She opened her handbag and pulled out the box of lavender madeleines. She slid them across the table. Harrison raised an eyebrow. He picked up one of the delicate, shell-shaped cookies. He examined it. He smelled it. Then he ate it. His analytical mask didn't slip, but a small, involuntary escaped his lips. He ate a second one. "Lavender," he said. "Difficult. It can taste like soap. This tastes like the south of France." "It's my grandmother's recipe," Amelia said softly. "The tort is my passion. But the madeleines, they're my soul." Harrison looked at her, a new respect in his eyes. He pushed a pen and a stack of papers across the table. "Welcome to Vantage, Ms. Hayes. Let's get to work. First order of business. You're going to teach my R&D team how to make this soul." The next 3 years were the hardest of her life. They were also the most rewarding. Harrison was true to his word. He gave her an education. It was a baptism by fire. She was enrolled in night classes at NYU's Stern School of Business. She worked alongside architects, branding specialists, and supply chain managers. She learned about P&L statements, EBITDA, and Series A funding. She learned how to command a room, how to negotiate with belligerent dairy farmers, and how to protect her recipes with ironclad NDAs. Harrison and his team transformed her. The mousy, flour-dusted woman disappeared. In her place was Amelia Hayes. Her hair was cut into a sharp, elegant bob. She traded her thrift store clothes for the severe, powerful silhouettes of the Roe and Tom Ford. She was still an artisan at heart, but she was now encased in the armor of a chief executive. She was the heart of the company. Harrison was the brain. Together, they were unstoppable. Aura Patisserie launched its flagship store on Madison Avenue 9 months later. The opening was the event of the season. The store was less a bakery and more a gallery of confections. Each dessert was displayed like a piece of jewelry under soft, warm lighting. The midnight torte was the centerpiece, but the lavender madeleines, sold in signature, weighted black boxes tied with a gold ribbon, became the must-have status symbol. Within 2 years, Aura had locations in Beverly Hills, London, and Dubai. Amelia's story, the one Harrison had so carefully crafted, was in Vogue and Forbes. The baker who built an empire from a broken heart. She was rich. She was powerful. She was famous. But she had never, not once, seen Julian Ashford. She had heard whispers that his marriage to Chloe Velez was rocky, that Ashford and Co. had made a series of bad, high-risk bets, but she never paid attention. Julian belonged to a different life, a different woman, until the night of the New York Public Library Literacy Gala. Amelia, as the anonymous chair of the event, had donated a 7-figure sum. She was 10 years removed from the girl in the cotton robe. She was ready. Amelia Hayes, the CEO, was a creation as carefully crafted as her midnight torte. The world saw the armor, the razor-sharp Tom Ford pantsuits, the quiet authority, the billion-dollar baker narrative that magazines adored. But under the armor, Amelia, the baker, still lived. The journey from a queen's hot plate to a $500 million valuation was not a fairy tale. It was a war fought on multiple fronts. Grayson Harrison had provided the weapons, the capital, the connections, the strategic mind. But Amelia had provided the soul, and that soul had to be hardened. Her new life began at 4 a.m., not in a coffee shop, but in the sprawling 20,000-square-foot commissary in Long Island City. This was the heart of Aura Patisserie, a temperature-controlled wonderland of polished steel, gleaming copper pots, and the scent of the highest-grade vanilla bean. While her executive team slept, Amelia would be there, her CEO suit replaced by pristine white chef's scrubs, her hands plunged into dough. She was not just a figurehead. She was the guardian of the product. "No, no, no," her voice would echo, sharp and clear. She stopped a young pastry chef who was about to scrape a vanilla pod. "You're wasting the soul. The caviar is the seed, but the aura is in the pod. We simmer the pod. We extract every last molecule of flavor. Our customers are not paying for good. They are paying for perfect." She was a demanding boss, not out of cruelty, but out of a ferocious respect for the craft. She knew the precise farmer in Madagascar who grew her vanilla, the small, family-owned apiary in Provence that supplied her lavender honey, and the Belgian chocolatier who crafted their custom 78% cacao blend. This obsession with quality was what made Aura untouchable. Harrison handled the spreadsheets. Amelia handled the senses. "Your story is the brand," Harrison had drilled into her. "They are buying your triumph." So, they built the flagship store on Madison Avenue, not just as a shop, but as a temple. Amelia worked with the architects, insisting on dark, reclaimed woods to mimic the color of her midnight tort and soft golden lighting that made everyone and everything look beautiful. "When a customer walks in," she explained to the design team, "they are walking into my grandmother's kitchen. It must feel like an embrace, warm, safe, but utterly luxurious." The brand's packaging was her masterpiece. The boxes were a deep, matte black, weighted and lined with gold leaf. Opening one was an experience. There was no plastic. Each confection was nestled in custom-molded silk paper. It was an act of deliberate, sensual unwrapping. The media, just as Harrison predicted, became infatuated with her. She was the anti-socialite. She didn't party. She didn't date. She worked. A Forbes reporter, after following her for a week, wrote, "To call Amelia Hayes a baker is to call Steve Jobs a computer salesman. She is a high priestess of sensory branding. She is not selling cake. She is selling self-worth. In her world, spending $100 on a tort is not an indulgence. It is an act of self-care. And in a world this chaotic, Aura Patisserie is the most stable religion on the market." The company grew. The empire expanded. Amelia's personal life, however, was non-existent. She lived in a large, beautiful, and empty penthouse in Tribeca. It was, she often reflected, just a more expensive version of Julian's sterile Park Avenue apartment. She had staff, a driver, a housekeeper, and much to her initial annoyance, a full-time security detail. "Grayson, it's absurd," she'd argued. "I'm a baker. Who needs security?" "You are not a baker, Amelia," Harrison had replied patiently. "You are the face of a $500 million brand. You are a very wealthy, very public, single woman. You are a target. You will have security." So Gavriel became her shadow, a tall, quiet Israeli man with sad eyes and an uncanny ability to be both invisible and omnipresent. He didn't speak much, but his presence was a comforting, solid weight in her new, ethereal world. She was respected. She was admired. She was even feared. But she was still lonely. Sometimes, late at night, she would stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, looking out over the glittering city that was now hers. She would think about the girl with the flower in her hair. She would think about the cold, cruel words. "You're just adequate." Julian, she learned, had married Chloe Velez in a lavish Hamptons ceremony just months after their divorce. The event was covered in Tatler. Amelia had seen the photos. Chloe, beautiful and brittle. Julian, smiling his shark-like smile. She'd heard, through the grapevine of New York's elite, that Ashford and Sappho was struggling. Julian's father had retired, leaving Julian in sole control. He had none of his father's caution. He'd poured the firm's money into high-risk, speculative tech and volatile crypto markets, trying to prove he was a titan. The whispers said he was leveraged to the hilt. The whispers said Chloe Velez's father had refused to bail him out. Amelia felt nothing. It was a story about strangers. Her present was the literacy gala at the New York Public Library. It was her first major public appearance as a benefactor, not just a businesswoman. Harrison had insisted. "It's time, Amelia. You're not just new money. You're a pillar of the community. You need to act like it. This is the next phase of the brand. So she agreed. She donated $2 million to fund children's reading programs across the 5 boroughs, and she would be attending. Her stylist had pulled a gown, a custom Oscar de la Renta in a deep, midnight blue velvet that matched the Aura branding. As she stood in her penthouse, zipping up the dress, she caught her reflection in the glass. The city lights blurred behind her. She was no longer adequate. She was an architect. She had built all of this. "Gabriel," she said into her intercom, "bring the car around. We're going to be late." The night of the Literacy Gala was a classic New York autumn evening, crisp, clear, and electric. The New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue was illuminated, its marble facade glowing like a promise. A river of black cars deposited the city's elite onto a red carpet that snaked up the grand stone steps. Julian Ashford and his wife, Chloe, were already inside. Their arrival had not been grand. They had taken an Uber, a fact that had put Chloe in a venomous mood. "I cannot believe we took a taxi," Chloe hissed, yanking at her sequined dress. "We look like peasants. Why is your driver unavailable?" "The firm is cutting back on expenses, Chloe. I told you," Julian muttered, adjusting a tie that suddenly felt too tight. "You mean you are cutting back?" she snapped. "My father was right. You're a terrible businessman. This is humiliating." Julian didn't have a response. He was a terrible businessman. Ashford & Co. was hollowed out. The crypto market had crashed, taking most of his clients, and his own, capital with it. He was a week away from insolvency. He was here tonight purely out of desperation, hoping to corner some old money client for a lifeline. He was stressed, he was failing, and his wife despised him. He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, just as a hush fell over the crowd in the grand entrance hall. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered, her spite momentarily forgotten, replaced by envy. Julian turned. A car had just pulled up. But it wasn't a car, it was a statement. A new model Rolls Royce Phantom, long, black, and silent as a shadow. A man in a dark suit, Gabriel, exited the passenger side. He was not a driver, he was a handler. He scanned the crowd, his eyes missing nothing, before opening the rear door. A single, elegant leg emerged, shod in a simple, lethally expensive black stiletto. Then she stepped out. The woman who emerged seemed to draw all the light on the steps toward her. She wore a midnight blue velvet Oscar de la Renta gown that clung to her curves before flaring out at the floor. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, but they were secondary to the woman herself. Her sharp, dark bob was glossed to perfection. Her face was calm, powerful, and familiar. Julian's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound lost in the collective intake of breath. It was Amelia. But it wasn't. It was his Amelia, the adequate Amelia, the Amelia who wore fuzzy socks and smelled like yeast. But this was not her. This was a creature of impossible poise and elegance. "My God," Julian breathed. "Who is she?" Chloe demanded, elbowing him. "She looks important." Amelia glided up the steps, Gabriel a pace behind her. The gala's coordinator, a flustered woman with a clipboard, rushed forward. "Miss Hayes, welcome. We are so honored to have you. The mayor is waiting to thank you for your extraordinary generosity." "Hayes?" Julian whispered, his mind short-circuiting. She'd taken back her maiden name. "Wait. Hayes?" Chloe's eyes went wide. As in, Aura Patisserie. That Amelia Hayes, the one from Forbes. "Julian, you idiot. That's the woman I told you to get an investment from." Julian couldn't speak. His blood had turned to ice. He was looking at a ghost in a $50,000 gown. Amelia moved through the room, and it was as if the Red Sea were parting. People didn't just make way for her. They leaned toward her, drawn by her gravity. She smiled, a small, polite, practiced smile. Her eyes, which he remembered as warm and brown, now seemed cooler, sharper. He watched, paralyzed, as the mayor himself took her hand and kissed it. He watched as she was ushered into the main hall, not as a guest, but as the guest of honor. "Julian! Julian!" Chloe was shaking his arm. "What is wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. Go talk to her. Introduce me." I can't," Julian stammered. "What do you mean, you can't? You're the best networker I know. Go, get us a piece of that bakery money. God knows we need it." "Chloe, you don't understand," Julian said, his voice cracking. "That woman, that's Amelia." Chloe's manicured hand froze mid-air. "What? What Amelia?" "My Amelia, my ex-wife." Chloe's face went through a rapid, terrifying series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a deep, burning rage. "Your plain baker wife! The one you threw out! That is her!" Julian could only nod, his gaze fixed on the woman across the room. She was holding a champagne flute, laughing quietly at something the mayor said. She looked radiant. She looked powerful. She looked like she had never been covered in flour in her life. And in that moment, it wasn't just regret that hit Julian. It was a catastrophic, soul-crushing realization. He hadn't just traded up. He had made the worst trade in the history of human existence. He hadn't just left an adequate woman. He had abandoned an empress. I need a drink," he said, turning to the bar. "Oh, no, you don't," Chloe hissed, grabbing his arm with steel-like talons. "You are going to fix this." "Fix what?" "You're going to go over there. You're going to remind her of the good times. And you are going to get us a meeting. You owe me that, Julian. You owe me." Julian looked at his wife, her face a mask of desperate, greedy ambition. Then he looked back at Amelia, a woman who commanded a room without raising her voice. He knew then, with sickening certainty, that his life was over. For the rest of the evening, Julian was a man possessed. He didn't network. He didn't schmooze. He watched. He watched Amelia. He watched her from behind marble pillars, from the crowded edges of the room, his eyes tracing her every move. He saw the way she tilted her head when she listened, the quiet, confident way she gestured with her hands. There was no trace of the insecure, slightly frumpy woman he'd left. This woman was a complete and total stranger, yet agonizingly familiar. His mind was a torrent of what-ifs. What if he'd stayed? What if he'd invested in her? That little baking hobby he'd mocked. It was now an empire. He, Julian Ashford, a man who prided himself on seeing the next big thing, had been living with a unicorn and had sent it to the glue factory. "Are you going to stare, or are you going to do something?" Chloe's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through his haze. She had been drinking heavily, her Cartier love bracelet, which Julian knew was a high-end replica, glinting under the lights. "I'm thinking," Julian snapped. "Well, think faster. She's heading for the exit." Chloe was right. Amelia was disengaging from the mayor, giving a final, polite nod. Her security man, Gavriel, materialized at her elbow. He spoke into his wrist, and Amelia began a slow, graceful glide toward the main doors. It was now or never. "Amelia!" Julian's voice was too loud. It cut across the refined murmur of the gala. The room went quiet. Amelia stopped. She turned, her face a polite, neutral mask. She looked at him, her eyes scanning him from his thinning hair to his scuffed shoes. It was the same look Grayson Harrison had given her years ago, the look of an analyst assessing a failing stock. She didn't recognize him. Or worse, she was pretending not to. I'm sorry, her voice, clear and low, carried across the hall. Have we met? The collective gasp was almost audible. Julian Ashford of the Park Avenue Ashfords was a nobody to her. Julian's face burned. He felt Chloe's nails dig into his arm. He took a step forward. Amelia, it's me, Julian. Amelia's mask held for a beat, then a tiny, almost imperceptible shift, a flicker of recognition, not of warmth, just recognition. Oh, she said. The word was flat, empty. Mr. Ashford, I see. I hadn't recognized you. It's been a long time. She turned to leave. Wait! Julian lurched forward, desperation making him clumsy. Please! Amelia! You look... My God, you look incredible. I had no idea. Before he could take another step, Gavriel was between them. His hand didn't touch Julian, but it was there, a solid wall. Mrs. Hayes is leaving, Gavriel said, his voice soft and final. Mrs. Hayes, Julian repeated, confused. But you're not. I took my name back, Julian, Amelia said, her voice still quiet, but now with a chill that cut to the bone. She was looking past him, at the door. It was the first thing I bought back. Amelia, please, Julian begged. He was a drowning man. I'm in trouble. The firm. I made some bad... I need help. It was pathetic. He knew it. The whole room knew it. Amelia finally looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, Julian saw an emotion. It wasn't love. It wasn't hate. It was pity. A cold, distant pity. Help, she said. Julian, the last time I was in trouble, you told me to be out by the end of the week. You left me with nothing but a box of recipes. You told me I was adequate. She took a small step closer, and Julian instinctively shrank back. You taught me a very valuable lesson that day, Julian. You taught me that adequate is a death sentence, and you taught me to always trade up. So I did. I made a mistake, he cried, his voice cracking. A terrible mistake. I see that now. Chloe, it's not what you think. Chloe? Amelia's eyes drifted over to where Chloe was standing, her face pale with fury. Ah, Mrs. Ashford, a pleasure. You've done wonders with him. Chloe, enraged at being addressed, stormed forward. You stay away from him, you baker! This is my husband! Amelia actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, genuine sound, and it shocked Julian more than anything else. Take him, Amelia said, giving Chloe a dismissive glance. He's all yours. I'm afraid his warranty has expired. She turned, and without a backward glance, swept out of the library, Gavriel at her back. The doors closed with a soft, final thud. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room was on Julian and Chloe. Chloe let out a sound like a wounded animal, and in a fit of pure, unadulterated rage, slapped Julian hard across the face. You loser! She shrieked, the veneer of class crumbling to dust. You let her get away. You had an empire, and you let her go. Julian just stood there, the imprint of his wife's hand glowing red on his cheek. He was ruined. Publicly, professionally, personally. He looked down at the floor, at the sticky patch of spilled champagne. He had never felt so cold or so adequate in his entire life. The end came, as it so often does, not with a bang, but with a sterile email from a law firm. Subject: Notice of Default and Asset Seizure, Ashford & Co. Julian had spent the last 3 weeks in a desperate, frantic scramble. After the humiliation at the gala, Chloe had left him. She'd packed her real bags, her real jewelry, and moved back into her father's penthouse, her lawyers already drawing up divorce papers. Julian was alone in the Park Avenue apartment, which he was also about to lose. His creditors were circling, The high-risk bets he'd made had all collapsed, and he had used the firm's own assets as collateral. It was an idiotic, amateur move. His last, desperate hope was a buyout. A private equity firm, North Star Holdings, had been quietly buying up his debt. They were a new player, aggressive and flush with cash. They had offered him a lifeline, a meeting to discuss a potential acquisition. They would buy the Ashford and Caspar's name, absorb the debt, and, if he was lucky, keep him on with a salary. It was a humiliating demotion, but it was better than prison. The meeting was set for a Friday at 10 a.m. at North Star's offices in the Chrysler Building. Julian put on his last good Zegna suit. He polished his shoes. He tried to project the image of the man he used to be, but he was just a ghost, haunting his own clothes. He arrived at the 70th floor offices. They were, like Vantage's, a statement of minimalist power. A receptionist led him down a long, white hallway to a massive corner boardroom. The view of Manhattan was staggering, but the room was empty, except for one person. She was sitting at the head of the acres-long table, her back to the window. She was not in a gown. She was in a severe, black, Tom Ford pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back. She was sipping from a simple white mug. It was Amelia. Julian stopped. His briefcase slipped from his sweaty hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Amelia? What? What are you doing here? Is this your Aura office? Amelia smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her smile at him in a decade. It was terrifying. Hello, Julian. Please, sit. Coffee? Where is North Star? Where is the board? He stammered, remaining standing. You're looking at her, Amelia said, gesturing to herself. North Star Holdings is my private investment firm, a little venture I started with the Aura profits. We've been acquiring things, distressed assets. The blood drained from Julian's face. He sank into a chair. You bought my debt. All of it, she confirmed, taking a sip. Every last toxic crypto-backed bond. You were surprisingly cheap. It seems you bet the entire firm on what was it? Moon Doge coin? It was a diversified. Amelia, why? He whispered. For revenge? To humiliate me? Amelia leaned forward. Her eyes were clear. There was no rage in them, no hate, not even the pity from the gala. There was just clarity. Revenge, she said, as if tasting a new ingredient. No, Julian. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. I'm not that person anymore. You taught me not to be. This isn't emotional. This is business. You taught me that too. She slid a thick stack of papers across the table. This is the final receipt, Julian. This is the dissolution of Ashford & Co. My firm, North Star, will be absorbing your assets, what little are left, to cover the debt. The Ashford name will be retired. Your partners have already been offered packages. So you're firing me. I'm liquidating you, Julian, she corrected. You're a bad investment. You always were. He stared at the woman across from him, the baker, the adequate wife. She had just dismantled his entire life, his legacy, with the same cool precision she used to pipe icing on a tort. He was broken. He had nothing left. No firm, no wife, no future. I still love you, he whispered. It was a lie. It was a gamble. It was the last, pathetic card he had to play. Amelia's smile vanished. She stood up, smoothing the front of her jacket. No, you don't, Julian. You don't love me. You love this. She gestured to the view, the room, the power. You love what I have. And the one thing you can't stand is that I'm the one who has it. She walked to the door. You taught me to be ruthless, Julian. You taught me to cut away things that are just adequate. And you, Julian, you are the definition of adequate. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. The apartment is part of the asset seizure. You have 24 hours to clear out your personal belongings. My security team will meet you there. Amelia, please, he begged, falling to his knees. Don't do this. Think of what we had. Amelia looked at him, a man she once loved, now just a crumpled, weeping suit on the floor. I am thinking of what we had, Julian, she said, her voice soft for the first time. You had a wife who adored you, a woman who would have worked her fingers to the bone for you, a partner, and you threw her in the trash with a half-eaten tart. She opened the door. Goodbye, Mr. Ashford. Thank you for the lessons. And she walked out. She didn't look back. She walked past the reception, into the elevator. As the door slid shut, she saw her reflection. She was calm. She was centered. She wasn't happy. She wasn't sad. She was just free. Julian was left on his knees in the empty boardroom, the silence of his failure ringing in his ears, and the smell of expensive coffee filling the air. 6 months passed. The New York winter had thawed, giving way to a bright, hopeful spring. The name Julian Ashford had evaporated from the city's financial pages, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at cocktail parties before being forgotten entirely. The Ashford and Codenis offices were gone, the name chiseled off the marble directory in the lobby. The Park Avenue apartment had been sold, its sterile, loveless contents auctioned off. Julian was a ghost. Amelia was an empress. But the empress was, for the first time in a decade, tired of her armor. Amelia was not in her Tribeca penthouse. She was not in a boardroom. She was in a bright, sun-drenched kitchen in the West Village, the kind of kitchen she had dreamed of in her Queen's walk-up. It was the flagship location of the Aura Foundation, her new, deeply personal project, a culinary school offering scholarships to women from underserved communities, teaching them the art and business of pastry. She was wearing a simple linen apron over jeans and a white t-shirt. Her hair was tied back in a simple, practical ponytail, and on her nose there was a small, familiar dusting of flour. She was teaching a young woman named Rosa how to fold butter into a croissant laminate. No, don't just roll, Amelia said, her voice warm and patient. You have to feel it. The butter and the dough have to be the same temperature, the same texture. They have to respect each other. It's a partnership. Rosa, concentrating, nodded. I'm afraid I'll mess it up. It's so delicate. It is delicate, Amelia agreed, placing her hands over Rosa's. But it's also strong. It's built in layers. You have to trust the process. You have to trust yourself. The glass door of the kitchen chimed. Grayson Harrison walked in, looking slightly out of place in his sharp, custom suit. He held a black Aura-branded coffee cup. I thought I'd find you here, he said, bypassing the pastries and heading for the sourdough starter Amelia was nurturing in the corner. The board thinks you're in St. Bart's. The board can think what it likes, Amelia smiled, wiping her hands. This is far more interesting. How are we? Tokyo is sold out, 3 months before opening. London wants to double its midnight torty order. And the final Ashford liquidation numbers are in. We've officially closed the file. He looked at her, searching. You're okay. Amelia looked at the bubbling starter, a living thing full of energy and potential. I am, Grayson. For the first time, I think I am. He nodded, a rare, genuine smile on his face. Good. Because this passion project of yours, the board is confused, but the numbers are in on this too. Our brand engagement is up 40%. They're calling you the People's CEO. It's brilliant marketing. Amelia laughed. "Grayson, you could find a profit margin in a poem. That's why you keep me," he said. He turned to leave, then paused. Gavriel is outside. He looks bored. This isn't exactly high threat. Amelia's smile softened. He's been a good shadow. He's the best. Grayson left. Amelia watched him go, then turned to her student. "You've got this, Rosa. Keep folding. I'll be right back." She walked out to the small courtyard. Gavriel stood by the black sedan, his posture as rigid as ever, his eyes scanning the quiet, tree-lined street. "Gavriel," she said. He turned instantly. "Mom, are we leaving?" "I am," she said. "You're not." He frowned, confused. "Mom." Amelia walked over to him. "You've been with me for 5 years, Gavriel. You've kept me safe while I built my fortress. But I don't live in a fortress anymore. I live in a kitchen." "My job is to protect you," he said, his voice tight. "I know." "And you did," she said. "But I'm not in danger anymore. The Julian chapter is over. I'm safe now." She held out a hand. "Grayson has a new assignment for you. Head of Global Security. A promotion. You'll be based in London. Unless you'd rather not." Gavriel looked at this woman, the baker in the flour-dusted apron. He looked at the quiet street. For the first time, his shoulders relaxed. A slow, tentative smile touched his lips. "London," he said, testing the word. I could do London." "Good." Amelia reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small, paper-wrapped pastry. It was a simple, warm almond croissant. "This is for the flight," she said. He took it. It was warm. It smelled like home. Amelia Hayes, free and clear, turned and walked back into her kitchen, back to her students, back to the life she hadn't been given, but had built. Amelia's story isn't just about wealth. It's about the profound, unbreakable value of self-worth. Julian didn't just lose a wife. He discarded the very person who held the key to her own empire. He saw a plain wife, while the world was waiting for a queen. What did you think of Julian's ultimate fate? Was Amelia's final decision justice, or was it cold revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of karma and transformation, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama every week. Don't miss what's coming next. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom dripped light onto 1,000 champagne flutes. But for Ava Lennox, the only illumination that mattered was the warm spotlight on her husband. Julian Cross, a man sculpted from ambition and Savile Row suits, was at the podium, charming the city's elite into funding his latest philanthropic venture. Ava, seated at the head table, rested a hand on the gentle swell of her 7-month pregnancy, a secret smile playing on her lips. Then he introduced his star protégé, Mila Kerr. And as the applause thundered, under the guise of a congratulatory embrace, Julian's lips found Mila's in a kiss that was anything but paternal. The camera flashes were like lightning, and in that blinding white, Ava's world shattered. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of money and hothouse hydrangeas. It was the kind of atmosphere Ava had learned to navigate with a practiced ease that felt like a performance. A world away from her days sketching blueprints in a cramped university studio. A life she now recalled with a strange, bittersweet nostalgia. She had been an architect of rising acclaim. A woman who saw the world in lines, structures, and possibilities. Then she met Julian Cross, a man who built empires not with steel and glass, but with binary code and sheer force of will. He hadn't just entered her life, he'd annexed it, his gravitational pull so immense that her own ambitions had quietly begun to orbit his until they were all but eclipsed. Tonight was the pinnacle of his latest achievement, the Lumina Foundation Gala, a charity he'd founded to bring tech education to underserved youth. It was a noble cause, and it looked spectacular on the cover of Forbes. From her seat at the head table, a position of honor that felt more like a display case, Ava watched him. He was a modern-day king surveying his court, his voice a rich baritone that could sell sand in the desert. He'd kissed her before leaving for the stage, a brief dry press of lips. "Wish me luck," he'd murmured, his eyes already scanning the room, focused on his audience, not on her. A familiar pang of distance, one she'd been expertly ignoring for months, pricked at her heart. She'd told herself it was just the pressure of the launch, the weight of his empire. She smoothed the silk of her custom maternity gown over her belly, feeling the soft, rolling kick of their baby. Noah Lennox, she thought, a name they'd chosen together on a rare, quiet Sunday that now felt a lifetime away. Your father is quite the showman. He commanded the stage, weaving a narrative of hope and innovation that was impossible to resist. He was selling a dream, and this room was full of buyers. "And none of this would be possible," Julian was saying, his smile catching the light, "without the tireless work of my team. In particular, I want to bring up the project lead, a mind as brilliant as she is dedicated. Please, a huge round of applause for Mila Kerr." Ava clapped along with everyone else, her smile genuine, if a little tired. She knew Mila, a whip-smart analyst in her mid-20s from Aura Dynamics, Julian's tech behemoth. Mila was a frequent fixture in their lives, a constant presence at their sterile, art-filled penthouse for late-night strategy sessions that Ava was tacitly expected to provide coffee for, but not participate in. Ava had always found her a little too eager, her gaze lingering on Julian a second too long, but she'd dismissed it as the hero worship of an ambitious subordinate. "I was so naive," a voice would whisper in her mind, much, much later. So willfully blind, Mila ascended the stage, a vision in emerald silk that clung to her like a second skin. She was flushed with success, her gaze fixed solely on Julian with an unnerving intensity. He met her at the podium, taking her hand. The crowd roared its approval. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, a gesture of a proud mentor. Ava felt another kick from Noah, this one sharper, more insistent, as if sensing the atmospheric shift she was trying to deny. Then it happened. In the split second between the peak of the applause and the blinding volley of camera flashes from the press pit, Julian's congratulatory hug became something else entirely. He cupped the back of Mila's head, his fingers sinking into her elaborate updo, and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a fleeting peck on the cheek. It was a kiss, a deep, possessive, undeniable kiss, captured for eternity in 100 strobing bursts of light. Time seemed to warp, to thicken like honey. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of the crowd, the orchestral music, it all receded into a dull, distant hum. The only thing Ava could see, the only thing that was real, was the tableau on stage. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, kissing another woman in front of the entire world. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, sucked the air from the room. A woman at a nearby table, a rival of Julian's whom Ava had always detested, covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horrified glee. For a heartbeat, Ava was paralyzed. Her mind, an architect's mind built on logic and reason, refused to process the image. It had to be a mistake, a trick of the light, an awkward angle. But the way Mila's hand rested on Julian's chest, the way his body angled possessively towards hers, there was no misunderstanding this. This was a truth as solid and brutal as concrete. Betrayal was a cold, physical thing. It started in her stomach, a knot of ice that spread through her veins, chilling her to the bone. The baby kicked again, a frantic, panicked tattoo against her ribs, as if he too could feel his world tilting off its axis. The kiss ended. Julian pulled back, his expression a flicker of pure panic before the mask of cool control slammed back into place. Mila looked dazed, her lipstick slightly smeared, her eyes glassy. They stood apart, suddenly 2 feet of empty space between them, screaming louder than the kiss itself. The silence in the ballroom was a living entity, vast and suffocating. It pressed in on Ava, on everyone. Something inside Ava, some carefully constructed load-bearing wall, snapped. The years of quiet accommodation, of sublimating her own identity for his, of being the perfect, supportive wife, it all incinerated in a blaze of white-hot fury. She wasn't just a spectator in this drama, she was a principal, and they had just handed her a live microphone. With a grace she didn't know she possessed, she rose from her chair. The heavy silk of her maternity gown swayed around her. Every eye in the room swiveled from the stage to her. She could feel their pity, their morbid curiosity, their judgment. She ignored it all. Her focus was singular. She walked towards the stage, her steps even and deliberate. A security guard moved to intercept her, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. He put a hand out. "Ma'am?" Ava didn't even look at him. She looked past him, at Julian, who saw her coming. His eyes were wide, pleading, warning, commanding her to stop, to sit down, to not make a scene. She walked right past the guard as if he were a ghost. She walked past her husband, her gaze fixed on the podium where the master of ceremonies had left his microphone just moments before. Her hand closed around the cool metal. It felt heavy, a scepter of newfound terrible power. She turned to face the stunned, silent crowd. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the cathedral of silence. She cleared her throat. The sound echoed through the vast hall. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a mask of rage and terror. She looked at Mila, who looked small and lost. Then her eyes swept across the hundreds of faces staring up at her. "Good evening," she said, her voice miraculously clear and steady. "It seems my husband, in his excitement, made a small omission in his thank yous." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly placed stone dropping into a silent pool. She saw Julian take a step toward her, his mouth opening to say something, anything. She held up a hand, a gesture of such authority that it stopped him cold. "He forgot to thank his other partner tonight," Ava continued, her voice ringing with a chilling clarity. "The one who has been with him not just on this project, but for the last 10 years. She let her gaze drift down to her swollen belly, a deliberate, theatrical gesture. She then looked back up, her eyes finding the lens of the lead photographer in the press pit. "And he forgot to thank his unborn child." She placed the microphone gently back on the stand. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked off the stage, down the steps, and through the parted sea of gawking socialites. The silence held until the grand ballroom doors swung shut behind her, and then the dam of whispers finally broke into a roar. The cold night air hit Ava like a physical blow, a welcome shock after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. The cacophony of her own thoughts was louder than the distant Manhattan traffic. The image of the kiss was seared onto the back of her eyelids, a permanent, ugly brand. He kissed her. He kissed her. He kissed her. The phrase looped, a mantra of misery. Her hand went instinctively to her phone. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, past Julian, husband, with a visceral flinch. She found the name she was looking for. Harper Ellis. Harper wasn't just her best friend. She was her anchor to the woman she'd been before Julian, a fiercely intelligent, no-nonsense litigation lawyer who saw the world in facts and evidence, not the gauzy illusions Ava had been living in. Harper answered on the second ring. "Ava, what's wrong? You sound—" "I need you," Ava choked out, the words cracking. The composure she'd brandished like a shield on stage was crumbling. "Can you Can you come get me? I'm at the Met Grand. I'm on my way. There was no hesitation, no barrage of questions, just the solid, unwavering certainty of a true friend. Harper had never fully trusted Julian, a sentiment she'd voiced gently early on but had dropped at Ava's defensive insistence. The memory of that now felt like another betrayal, one she had inflicted upon herself. Ava waited on the curb, ignoring the curious glances of the valets. She felt strangely disconnected from her own body, as if she were watching a scene from a movie. The pregnant wife, abandoned on a sidewalk in a couture gown. It was all so pathetic, so cliché. A black SUV pulled up, and Harper jumped out of the passenger seat, her face etched with a mixture of fury and concern. "Get in," Harper said, her arm wrapping around Ava's shoulders, guiding her into the warm interior. "Don't say a word until we're moving." As the car pulled away from the curb, a frantic Julian burst through the ballroom doors, his eyes scanning the street like a predator. He saw their vehicle, his face a mess of desperation. He shouted her name, the sound swallowed by the city. Ava didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, watching the glittering skyline blur through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. The sanctuary of Harper's Upper West Side apartment was a world away from the cold, minimalist expanse of the penthouse Ava shared with Julian. Harper's place was cluttered with law books, overflowing bookshelves, and the faint, comforting scent of coffee and old paper. It was real. It was a home. Harper handed her a glass of water and sat opposite her on a worn leather sofa. "Okay," she said softly, her lawyerly intensity tempered with deep affection. "Tell me exactly what happened." Ava recounted the story in a monotone, the words feeling foreign and rehearsed. The speech, the introduction, the kiss, the microphone. As she spoke, the numbness began to recede, replaced by wave after wave of nauseating pain. "He did it, in front of everyone," she whispered, the reality of the public humiliation crashing down on her. "All those people, his board members, our friends." "They're not your friends if they're his friends," Harper said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "And screw his board members. The only people who matter right now are you and that baby." Just then, Ava's phone began to buzz incessantly. Julian. 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 A text message flashed on the screen, a follow-up to the missed calls. "Ava, pick up the phone. We need to talk. This is a huge misunderstanding. You're being hormonal and emotional. You completely overreacted. Don't do this." Hormonal. The word was a lit match on a trail of gasoline. The raw grief momentarily gave way to a towering rage. "A misunderstanding?" she said, her voice shaking with fury as she showed the text to Harper. "He thinks a tongue down another woman's throat is a misunderstanding?" "Classic narcissist," Harper muttered, her eyes dark. "Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught. He's sorry you blew up his carefully curated image." The front door of the apartment buzzed, a loud, jarring sound that made Ava jump. Harper checked the intercom, her expression hardening. "Speak of the devil." "Don't let him in!" Ava pleaded, panic seizing her. The thought of facing him now, in his self-righteous anger, was unbearable. "I wasn't planning on it," Harper said, pressing the talk button. "What do you want, Julian?" His voice, tinny and distorted through the speaker, was laced with an uncharacteristic desperation. "Harper, please, I just need to talk to my wife." "She doesn't want to talk to you," Harper replied flatly. "Don't you dare speak for her! Ava, I know you can hear me. Open the door! We are married. You are carrying my child." My child. Not our child. The possessive pronoun was a dagger. He saw her, he saw the baby, as extensions of himself, possessions to be managed. "Go home, Julian," Ava said, her voice surprisingly strong as she leaned towards the intercom. "There's nothing left to say tonight." There was a moment of shocked silence, then the sound of his fist banging against the solid wood of the door. "Ava, don't you dare walk away from me! Do you have any idea what you've done? You've embarrassed me! You've jeopardized everything!" The entitlement, the sheer audacity of his words, was staggering. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably in Ava. The pain was still there, a gaping wound, but a fragile layer of steel was beginning to form around it. She wasn't just a victim. She was a woman who had been pushed too far. "Leave," she said again, her voice like ice. They heard him curse, a string of vile words, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps and a final, frustrated kick to the door. Harper let out a long breath. "Okay," she said, turning back to Ava. "Phase 1 is over. He knows he can't bully his way in here. Now comes the hard part." Ava looked at her friend, her eyes filled with a terrifying, uncertain future. "What's the hard part?" "Deciding what you're going to do next," Harper said, her gaze unwavering, "and taking back your life, piece by piece." Ava spent the night in Harper's guest room, a small, cozy space that felt like a fortress. She didn't sleep. She lay awake, one hand on her belly, feeling the steady, rhythmic movements of her son. With every kick, she felt a growing resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore. She had to be strong for him. She had to build a world for him that wasn't founded on lies and shadowed by betrayal. She thought about the life she had built with Julian, the lavish parties, the international travel, the penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. It was a beautiful, gilded cage, and she hadn't even realized she was trapped until the door had been blown clean off its hinges. The morning light crept through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Ava sat up. The grief was still there, a heavy cloak. But underneath it, a tiny, unfamiliar spark ignited. It felt like anger. It felt like determination. It felt like the architect she used to be, looking at the rubble of a demolished building and starting to sketch the blueprints for something new. Something stronger. Something that was entirely her own. The next 48 hours were a blur of digital fallout. The gala mic drop became a viral sensation. Grainy cell phone videos of Ava's speech were everywhere, juxtaposed with high-resolution photos of the kiss. News headlines screamed, "Cross-Empire shaken by scandal." Pregnant wife's speech stuns elite. Julian's PR machine went into overdrive, issuing a statement that was a masterpiece of corporate spin. It spoke of a profound personal misunderstanding, immense pressure, and requested privacy during this difficult time for our family. The subtext was clear. Ava was unstable, her actions the result of pregnancy-induced hysterics. Mila Kerr had vanished. Her social media was deactivated, her phone disconnected. She was a ghost, erased from the narrative Julian was desperately trying to control. From the quiet sanctuary of Harper's apartment, Ava watched it all unfold with a sickening detachment. Harper acted as a gatekeeper, fielding calls from Julian's lawyers, his panicked mother who alternated between blaming Ava for the scene and Mila for the affair, and reporters offering six-figure sums for an exclusive interview. Ava's instructions were simple. Say nothing. Her silence, Harper advised, was her most potent weapon. "He's trying to paint you as the crazy, hormonal wife," Harper said, scrolling through a newsfeed on her laptop. "It's a classic misogynistic defense. We're not going to engage. We're going to build a case." "A case for what?" Ava asked, her voice hollow. "For your freedom," Harper replied, her eyes flashing. "For your future." "Ava, you need to understand the power imbalance here. Julian has controlled the finances, the narrative, your entire life for years. We need to untangle you from him, legally and financially. Did you sign a prenup?" Ava nodded numbly. "Yes, when we got married. I didn't even read it properly. I was in love. I thought it was just a formality, something his father insisted on." "Of course you did," Harper sighed. "Let me guess. He told you it was to protect his family's assets, but that he'd always take care of you." Ava's silence was answer enough. The memory of that conversation was painfully clear. They were in his sleek, minimalist apartment, years before the penthouse. He'd slid the thick document across the glass table. "It's just paper, Ava," he'd said, his hand covering hers. "You and I, what we have, is real. This is just to make the old guard happy. She had signed it without a second thought, high on love and the shared dream of their future. "I need a copy of that prenup," Harper said, her voice all business. "And I need you to start thinking. About everything. Bank accounts, assets, properties. Any conversations you remember about business deals. He co-mingled your lives. It's highly likely he co-mingled his funds. That's our way in." The task felt monumental. For 10 years, her life had been a seamless tapestry woven with Julian's. Where did he end and she begin? In the quiet moments, when Harper was at work, she found herself drifting back. She remembered the specific project she gave up for him. It was a chance to join a prestigious firm in Chicago, to work on a groundbreaking museum design. Julian had been on the cusp of securing his first round of major funding for Aura. "I need you here, Ava," he'd pleaded. "This is our moment. Once Aura takes off, you can build anything you want. I'll fund it myself." It was another promise, another dream he'd sold her, that she had willingly bought. She began to see a pattern in the past, a slow, insidious erosion. "Honey, you don't need to work, I've got this. Let my financial guys handle our investments. You shouldn't have to worry about it. This party is important for us. Can you push back your deadline?" Each one seemed reasonable at the time, a small sacrifice for their shared future. But cumulatively, they had dismantled her independence, leaving her utterly dependent on the man who had just shattered their future. A week after the gala, a package arrived, delivered by a high-end courier. It was from Julian. Inside was not a letter of apology, but a velvet box containing a breathtaking diamond necklace, the kind of ostentatious bauble he used to placate her after a missed anniversary or a cruel remark. There was also a note, written on his heavy, embossed personal stationery. "My dearest Ava, I know you're hurting, and I am profoundly sorry for the pain this situation has caused. My actions were inexcusable, a terrible lapse in judgment under immense professional strain. Mila meant nothing. It was a moment of madness. This necklace is a small token of my regret, but my real apology will be the rest of my life, which I want to spend making this up to you and our son. Please come home. We can fix this. We are a family. I love you. Yours always, Julian." It was a carefully crafted performance of remorse, but Ava could now see the architecture of his manipulation. The blame shifted to professional strain, the dismissal of Mila as nothing, a convenient erasure of another human being, the bribe of the necklace, and the final cloying appeal to family. She looked at the diamonds, cold and glittering. They weren't a symbol of love. They were a price tag. The price of her silence, her compliance, her forgiveness. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done in years. She retrieved her old portfolio case from storage in Harper's spare closet. Opening it was like opening a time capsule. Inside were her architectural drawings, her sketches, her ambitious designs for sustainable urban housing and community centers. The paper was crisp, the ink bold. Here was the woman she used to be, passionate, creative, independent, a woman who built things. She spread the blueprints across Harper's dining table. The lines were clean, the concepts innovative. She saw her own potential reflected in them, a potential she had allowed Julian to bury. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in her chest. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of her old self. The architect, the builder. She took Julian's note and the velvet box. She repackaged them and sent them back via courier with a single item of her own enclosed. A high-quality scan of the napkin on which she had sketched the layout for his first office, all those years ago. There was no note. The message was clear. I remember who I was. I remember what I contributed. I am not for sale. That evening, she and Harper sat down with the prenup, which Harper had finally obtained through a formal request. Harper's red pen flew across the pages, circling clauses, making notes in the margins. "It's a monster, just as I expected," Harper said grimly. "It's ironclad. It essentially walls off all of Aura Dynamics' profits and any assets he held before the marriage. It leaves you with a one-time payout and the penthouse, which, by the way, is technically owned by a shell corporation." Ava's heart sank. "So I have nothing." "Not nothing," Harper corrected, her eyes gleaming with a predatory legal light. "But not nearly what you're owed as his partner for a decade. The payout is insulting, but," she tapped a section with her pen, "there's a lifestyle clause. It guarantees you will be maintained in the lifestyle to which you have become accustomed. That's subjective and open to interpretation. And there's this." She pointed to another clause, one Ava had never noticed. The infidelity clause. It was standard, almost boilerplate. In the event of documented adultery, the terms of the settlement could be renegotiated. "The gala wasn't just a humiliation, Ava," Harper said, a slow, grim smile spreading across her face. "It was evidence. Hundreds of witnesses and high-resolution photos. He didn't just break your heart. He voided his own contract." Suddenly, the path forward, while still terrifying, became clearer. This wasn't just about emotional survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was hers. "And there's something else," Harper said, her voice dropping. "That professional strain he mentioned in his note? I did some digging. Aura Dynamics is about to launch their biggest project ever, a new OS called Janus. It's supposed to revolutionize everything. But there are rumors on the street. Rumors that the tech is buggy, that they're bleeding cash to fix it, that Julian has leveraged everything, personally and professionally, on its success." The pieces began to click into place. The pressure, the desperation, the recklessness. "He's not just fighting for his marriage," Ava realized, a cold dread mixing with her resolve. "He's fighting for his empire." "Exactly," Harper confirmed. "And a messy, public divorce, especially one where his ex-partner might have a claim to a piece of the company she helped start. That could spook his investors. It could bring the whole house of cards down." The power dynamic, which had felt so impossibly skewed, had just shifted, ever so slightly, in her favor. Julian had built a gilded cage for her, but in his arrogance, he had just handed her the key. The first shot was fired not with a headline, but with a quiet, formal legal filing. "Ava Lennox versus Julian Cross. Petition for dissolution of marriage." Harper's team filed it at the close of business on a Friday, ensuring it would hit the press on Monday morning. A controlled detonation. The grounds were simple. Irreconcilable differences, citing the now infamous infidelity clause in their prenuptial agreement. Julian's response was swift and brutal. His legal team, a phalanx of silver-haired sharks from a top-tier firm led by a notorious lawyer named Ethan Ward, filed a counter-motion to seal the proceedings, citing his right to privacy and accusing Ava of attempting to leverage the situation for an exorbitant and punitive financial gain. They painted her as a vindictive gold digger, her mic drop moment not an act of a wounded wife, but a calculated theatrical performance. "He's trying to bury us in paperwork and bleed us dry with legal fees," Harper explained, pacing her office, which had become Ava's war room. "It's a classic Goliath tactic. He thinks you'll run out of money or resolve." "He's wrong," Ava said. Her voice was quiet, but it held a new tensile strength. The past few weeks had been a crucible, burning away the dross of her old life. She had established a routine. Morning prenatal yoga to connect with her body and the baby. Hours spent with Harper and her legal team, learning the language of discovery and depositions. And in the evenings, she would unroll her old blueprints, not just looking at them, but reworking them, updating them with new ideas, new materials. It was more than a hobby. It was a reclamation of her mind. The first face-to-face meeting took place in a sterile conference room, halfway between their respective lawyers' offices. It was neutral ground, a legal Switzerland.
Ava saw Julian for the first time since the gala. He looked thinner, the skin stretched taut over his cheekbones. His expensive suit couldn't hide the shadows under his eyes. When his gaze met hers across the polished mahogany table, she saw not love or remorse, but a cold, reptilian fury. He saw her not as his wife, but as a hostile variable in a critical equation, a threat to his empire. Ava had prepared for this. She had visualized it with Harper, rehearsed her own composure. She gave him a slight neutral nod, her expression unreadable. Her calm seemed to unnerve him more than any outburst would have. His lead attorney, Ethan Ward, led the charge. "Mr. Cross is prepared to be generous, Ava," he began, using her first name with a practiced, paternalistic air that set her teeth on edge. "He is willing to honor the original terms of the prenup, with a significant upward adjustment as a gesture of goodwill." Harper scoffed. "A gesture of goodwill? Your client publicly humiliated his pregnant wife, an act that has caused immeasurable emotional distress and damage to her reputation. He violated the contract. We are not interested in his goodwill. We are interested in a fair and equitable division of the marital assets, including a valuation of Ms. Lennox's early contributions to the founding of Aura Dynamics." Ethan Ward laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "That's absurd. A pittance of seed money from a girlfriend 20 years ago does not entitle her to a stake in a multi-billion-dollar corporation." "It wasn't a pittance, it was her entire inheritance," Harper countered, sliding a file across the table. "And here are the original napkin sketches for the first office, along with time-stamped emails from that era where Mr. Cross himself refers to her as his co-founder and partner in crime. We believe a jury will find that very compelling." Ava watched Julian's jaw tighten. He remembered. She saw it in the flicker of his eyes. He had forgotten that she had kept everything. She was an architect. She archived her life. The negotiation stalled. Julian's strategy was clear: drag it out, make it painful, and hope she would break. But something unexpected happened. An email appeared in Harper's inbox from an anonymous, encrypted address. Subject: Janus. The source code is a mess. He's been using shell corporations to pay consultants who are fixing the bugs off the books, hiding the true cost from the board. One of those consultants is Mila Kerr. He didn't fire her. He just moved her to a different payroll. Check the financials for Project Nightingale. There was no signature, no way to trace the sender. "My God," Harper breathed, reading the email over Ava's shoulder. "If this is true, this is fraud. Wire fraud. Securities fraud. He's not just lying to you. He's lying to his shareholders and his board of directors." "It's her," Ava said instantly. "Mila, it has to be." Mila Kerr had not been erased after all. She had been hidden. Julian had paid for her silence and her continued work, believing her loyalty or her ambition could be bought. But he had miscalculated. He had shown her exactly what he did with women he no longer had a use for. He humiliated them and cast them aside. He had shown Mila her own future. "This is our leverage," Harper said, her mind racing. "This is the key that unlocks everything, but it's anonymous. We can't use it in court without a source." "Then we find her," Ava said, her resolve hardening. "We need to find Mila Kerr." Finding Mila was like hunting a ghost. But Ava had an idea. She remembered Mila mentioning her younger sister, a student at NYU. It was a long shot, a detail gleaned from a long-forgotten conversation at a company picnic years ago. Ava, however, remembered everything. Leaving Harper to the legal trenches, Ava took a cab to the NYU campus. It was a world away from the gleaming towers of Midtown. It was young, vibrant, and real. Using the university's online directory, she found a contact email for Chloe Calloway. She wrote a simple, non-threatening message. "Chloe, my name is Ava Lennox. I know this is a strange request, but I believe your sister, Mila, may be in a difficult situation. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for the truth. I think we might be able to help each other. If she's willing to talk, she knows how to ensure it's confidential. It was a message in a bottle, cast into a digital ocean. For 2 days, there was nothing. Ava began to think it was a mistake. Then a new encrypted email arrived. Subject: Ria Janus. A coffee shop in Brooklyn. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone! The meeting was tense. The coffee shop was a small, hip establishment filled with freelancers and students. Mila sat in a corner booth, hunched over a laptop. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman on the stage. She was pale, wearing no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked haunted and paranoid, her eyes darting towards the door. "Thank you for meeting me," Ava began, sitting opposite her, placing her hands on the table where Mila could see them. "I'm not doing this for you," Mila said, her voice brittle, refusing to meet Ava's eyes. "I'm doing this for me. He ruined my life." "He lied to you," Ava said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of shared fact. Mila finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and shame. "He promised me everything. He said you two were basically separated, that the marriage was just for appearances until the Janus launch was over. He said he was trapped. He said he loved me." The last words were a bitter whisper. "He told me you were a brilliant, once-in-a-generation mind," Ava countered quietly. "He also told me I was the love of his life. Julian builds realities to suit his needs. We were just living in different ones. He told me you were fragile," Mila confessed, looking down at her hands. "Needy. That you didn't understand the pressures he was under. He said you held him back from his true potential." "And what do you think now?" Ava asked gently. Mila gave a short, mirthless laugh. "I think he's a user, and I think he's dangerous. When the gala blew up, he didn't apologize. He blamed me for being too conspicuous. Then he threatened me. Told me if I ever spoke about Janus, or our arrangement, he'd make sure I was blacklisted from the tech industry forever." "He can't silence both of us," Ava said. "If you're willing to come forward, my lawyer can offer you full immunity and protection. Your testimony about the financial fraud, about Project Nightingale, would be irrefutable." Mila hesitated, the fear warring with her anger. "What do I get out of it?" "You get your life back," Ava replied. "You get to stop looking over your shoulder. You get to be the brilliant analyst Julian once claimed you were, not his dirty little secret. You get to expose him for what he is." Ava slid a business card across the table. Harper's card. "The choice is yours, but his empire is built on lies, and buildings built on faulty foundations always, eventually, collapse." Ava left the coffee shop and walked out into the crisp autumn air. She didn't know what Mila would do, but as she placed a hand on her belly, where Noah was now a constant, reassuring presence, she felt a profound sense of peace. She was no longer just reacting to Julian's actions. She was building her own case, laying her own foundation, designing her own future. She had become the architect of her own war, and for the first time since the gala, she believed she could win. Mila Kerr made her choice. 3 days after the coffee shop meeting, she walked into Harper Ellis's office with her lawyer and a laptop containing Julian's corporate time bomb. There were spreadsheets detailing off-ledger payments, hidden ledgers for Project Nightingale, incriminating emails, and secret recordings of conversations with Julian, where he detailed the scheme to hide Janus's flaws and defraud his investors. It was a nuclear bomb, and Harper had the launch codes. Harper's strategy was precise and devastating. She didn't leak the information to the press, which would be chaotic. Instead, she arranged a private meeting with 2 specific members of the Aura Dynamics Board of Directors, the 2 known for their rigid ethics and low tolerance for risk. In a sterile boardroom high above the city, she presented them with a courtesy preview of the evidence Mila was prepared to deliver to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The fallout was instantaneous and catastrophic for Julian. The board convened an emergency meeting that same night. Faced with irrefutable proof of financial misconduct and the threat of a federal investigation, that could crater the company's stock value, they acted to save the company from its creator. Julian Cross was summarily dismissed as CEO of Aura Dynamics. Effective immediately, he was forced to sell back his controlling shares at a significantly reduced price to cover the internal investigation's costs. He was locked out of the building he had built, his name scrubbed from the company website by dawn. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, a clean corporate press release that sent shockwaves through the financial world. It cited leadership transitions and a renewed commitment to transparent governance. The real story, of course, bled out through anonymous sources. The stories of the gala, the affair, and now the fraud all coalesced into a single, damning narrative. Julian Cross was not just an adulterer. He was a cheat in every sense of the word. His reputation, the currency he valued above all else, was irrevocably destroyed. Stripped of his title, his company, and his power, Julian was a king in exile. The legal battle for the divorce, which he had fought with such arrogance, was now his only remaining battlefield. But he was no longer a Goliath. He was just a man, exposed and vulnerable. His lawyers, recognizing the shift in leverage, pushed for a quick settlement. The new offer was a world away from the first. It gave Ava everything she was entitled to, and more. The penthouse was signed over to her, free and clear. A substantial portion of Julian's remaining personal assets, including a diversified investment portfolio, was transferred to a trust for her and Noah. The insulting one-time payout was replaced with a lifetime alimony agreement that truly reflected the lifestyle clause, and most importantly, a section was added acknowledging her foundational role in the company's early days, a moral victory that meant more to Ava than any dollar amount. Ava signed the papers in Harper's office, her hand steady. It wasn't a moment of triumphant celebration, but one of quiet, solemn closure. The war was over. She had won, but the victory felt heavy. The cost measured in years of lost identity and a broken heart. 2 months later, in the calm, sterile environment of a hospital delivery room, Ava gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Noah Lennox. She gave him her name. He was her future, not an extension of a broken past. Holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers, she felt a love so pure and overwhelming it washed away the last vestiges of bitterness towards Julian. He was no longer a monster in her mind. He was just a sad, flawed man who had lost his way, the distant father of her son. Ava didn't stay in the penthouse. It held too many ghosts in its minimalist, echoing rooms. She sold it, using the funds to purchase a beautiful, neglected brownstone in Brooklyn, not far from where she had met Mila. It was a project. It had good bones, but needed a complete overhaul. It needed an architect. The next year was one of quiet, joyful construction. She supervised the renovation herself, her baby boy strapped to her chest in a carrier, gurgling happily as his mother pointed out where new walls would go, where skylights would open up the space to the sun. It was often lonely. There were nights when the baby was finally asleep, and the silence of the house felt enormous. In those moments, she grieved not for Julian, but for the family she thought she would have. Yet with each stud she saw framed in each wall that went up, she was building not just a house, but a fortress of her own making. She reopened her own firm, Lennox Architecture. Starting small, taking on projects that mattered to her, a community library, a pro bono design for a women's shelter. Her work was celebrated for its heart and ingenuity. She was building a life, one brick, one blueprint at a time. She heard about Julian sporadically. He had avoided jail time by cooperating with the SEC investigation into his own company, but his fortune was decimated, his name a pariah in the business world. He had retreated to a smaller, inherited property upstate, living a life of quiet obscurity that would have once been his worst nightmare. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost 2 years after the gala, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Ava, it's Julian. His voice was different. The booming confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet, hesitant tone she'd never heard before. Ava paused, her heart giving a single, hard thump. She sat down on the steps of her nearly finished brownstone. Julian, I know I have no right to call you, he began, the words tumbling out. I saw an article about your new firm, The Shelter. It looked beautiful. It looked like you. It is, she said simply. There was a long silence on the line. She could hear him take a shaky breath. I was so lost, Ava, he said, his voice cracking. I built this whole world on the idea that I had to be the biggest, the most powerful. I thought that was what made me worthy. Of success. Of you. I was running from the fear that I was nothing without it. And in the end, I destroyed everything. I destroyed us. I lied to you. I humiliated you, and I am so sorry. It's a pathetic, late, useless apology. But I needed to say it. Ava listened. The apology wasn't for her, not really. It was for him. It was a step in his own redemption. And she found, to her surprise, that she could accept it without sacrificing any part of her own hard-won peace. Thank you for saying it, Julian, she said, her voice gentle. Could I, maybe, see him? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Noah, I'll do whatever you want. Supervised, a park, just for a few minutes. I want to see my son. Ava looked out the large, newly installed window of her office at the plans for her next project spread across her desk. Downstairs, she could hear Noah laughing as her nanny played with him. Her world was full. It was safe. It was hers. The architect in her knew that some structures are too damaged to be repaired. You have to tear them down and build something new. But she also knew that forgiveness wasn't about rebuilding the old, but about clearing the ground for the future. Okay, Julian, she said, a decision solidifying in her heart. We can arrange that. He was Noah's father. He could not be her husband. But perhaps, in time, he could learn to be that. His path to redemption was his own to walk. But she would not be the gatekeeper who barred him from his son. Her own structure was sound. It was strong enough to withstand anything. Ava's story isn't just about the fall of a millionaire. It's about the rise of a woman who refused to be a footnote in her own life. From the ashes of a spectacular betrayal, she didn't just rebuild, she redesigned her entire world on her own terms. She traded a gilded cage for a home with a foundation of self-respect, proving that true power isn't about the name on a skyscraper, but the strength to grab the microphone and speak your truth, even when your voice is shaking. Her journey from heartbreak to architect of her own destiny is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can become the blueprints for our greatest achievements. She didn't just get her life back, she built a better one from the ground up. What would you have done in Ava's shoes? If her story of resilience and rebirth inspired you, show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see that it's possible to build a beautiful life from the rubble, and subscribe for more tales of incredible strength. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.